Welcome to another episode of the TikTok Famous Podcast. Today, I have Rev Karla, the spiritual teacher captivating over 800,000 followers across platforms with her raw honesty and radical compassion. An ordained interfaith and inner spiritual minister, Rev Karla left organized religion to help others heal from religious trauma and reclaim their spiritual autonomy. Her content challenges patriarchal conditioning and invites a deeper, more authentic connection to what's sacred in everyday life. She's proof that spirituality and self-awareness can go viral when they're rooted in courage, compassion, and truth. Stay with us.
You're listening to the TikTok Famous Podcast, where viral fame meets raw reality. Join your host, Meredyth as she dives deep with your favorite creators to uncover the real stories behind the scroll, the highs, the lows, the algorithm chaos, and everything in between. This is not your average interview. This is the TikTok Famous Podcast.
Thank you so much for being here. Backstage, I was just telling you how anxious and energy-filled I am. And as soon as you got backstage with me, it just got even bigger. So I'm so blessed to have you here. Thank you so much.
It is such an honor. And I mean that. I love the connections that social media has brought us together, especially for a time such as this, if we can be biblical for just a second. I think that it's about reimagining what the future holds and the collective and reimagining that, even because of redefining what community means. And that's exactly what these kind of podcasts do. So thank you so much for inviting me.
It is amazing how many amazing people I've met on TikTok, Instagram, TikTok especially. It's such a personal, incredible place to share ideas. And I think what's so amazing about it is it does allow people that I would have never met in real life to be able to be very intimate with in this very special way. Did you ever think in your wildest dreams, that first time you hit record, that you'd be sitting here with over almost 1 million people watching, following, commenting, interested? Oh my God, like this is wild.
Never. When I first started creating content, I did it just on one platform, which was Facebook. And I was really writing about my deconstructing journey. And it really came out very contemplative. I spent a lot of time on a place that I called my prayer bench. So my writings were called From My Prayer Bench.
I love that.
But at that time, I was also unpacking the realization of what was happening in our country. And so that intersection was where I really started to find the tension and where I really needed to unpack go deeper into my deconstructing.
Yeah.
When I first decided, it was a nudge from a grandson who said that you need to get on TikTok. And I did a couple of videos, and really what they didn't do much.
Beginning is so bad, isn't it?
It's awful. It's so humbling. And those videos are still out there. People can go see them.
Yes.
But someone encouraged me to speak from a place of go deeper, be more authentic, say what's on your mind. And that was a big favor, because even in those prayer bench writings, I was just on the surface, not really being disruptive. So anybody could find themselves in your writing. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I knew the kind of person that I was talking to. And this was the person who had been hurt by church, who was deconstructing, most likely seeking spirituality outside of that organized religion structure. And then now at a place where they're questioning everything.
Yeah.
And so the first video I did, I said, fine, I'm just gonna say, this is what it means to be spiritual, but not religious. And at that time, I could still have my notifications on for TikTok because I was only getting a couple a day. So I put my phone down. I went out to babysit my grandkids, and all of a sudden it's going ding, 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 ding. I'm like, what is happening? What family chat? What drama am I missing?
What did I buy?
Exactly. My grandson picked it up. He said, Tata. They call me Tata. You need to come see what's happening. And with a matter of days, I had over 100,000 followers, and they're just continued to speak from a place of authenticity, very much a place of just disruption, not afraid to agitate. And that oftentimes would lead to a groundswell of awareness for people, but then also sometimes where followers would fall back when I would get a little uncomfortable with them. So if you're hearing a dog snoring, it's my dog that just decided.
This is the real deal here. It is what it is.
It's the real deal. He is really going at it over there in the chair.
Good for him. Good for him. I'm in the same kind of place that you are, very spiritual. Like, I would say spirituality is my main everything. It's everything. It's my husband comes home and tells me something. To most people, it would blow up their lives. I'm like, it'll work out. Like, I just know it will. It always has. I'm 54 years old. I've gotten to this place. I've always, it always has worked out. I don't know what that means. I don't know how that's going to look, but I put this here someplace for some reason, and here we are, right? And so now it's my thing to parse through. Breast cancer went through that same thing. What am I here to learn? How is this a blessing? And that's kind of how I go through everything. When it comes to church, and I've been to all of them, raised Episcopalian, I did a stint in fundamental Baptist with an abusive boyfriend, very abusive, like physically abusive, emotionally, mentally abusive, and fundamental Baptist. Your hair is your honor. You have to wear skirts, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I've always been drawn to church, and through a lot of, as we say, unpacking, recognize that it wasn't the church necessarily. It was the energy that was at the church that took the time to focus in that way. And as I've undone all of that, I realized that, Dorothy, it was within you all the time, right? You could always go home. And I think what we that are doing this type of work, you especially, is that people say church is a good place. It's a community place. It's a place I go and do these things. And I think that is probably the main pushback is, how could it be bad if it does good? How could it be bad when I go there, I feel so good? And that's where God is. And that's where I learn all these good, moral, ethical things. How could that possibly be bad? What do you say to those people, like my mother-in-law who lives at church and breathes church, that she finds peace and solace there?
Well, good for her. I was her at one time. I was at the church 7 days a week. I had the keys to the building. I facilitated many leadership groups. I was the person to go to if there was a problem in children's education, with whatever needed to be done. I was a problem solver, and I equated my work inside the church with my spirituality, because I was brought up in the Southern Baptist tradition where works did equate to some kind of faith. Even though once baptized, always baptized, there was still something about those proverbial stars in your crown that equated to God, the church pastor, and then your service to that organization, because they were the closest thing to heaven on earth. But one of the things I like to say about those of us who deconstructed and then became unchurched, and for many of us, I want to be clear, I'm no longer a Christian. I still hold on to the tenets that desire me to seek Jesus and the teachings outside of the framework of Christianity.
Okay.
But I wrote about that extensively, but I really am standing in that firmly now, because that was just something that happened for me this past year. But what I want to make clear to people who continue on their deconstructing journey, as I did, or as I am, I say, we're not here to proselytize or evangelize that people should leave church. For some people, deconstructing is deconstructing a mindset or a belief system that harms others, that teaches you that you are morally and spiritually superior based on your biblical interpretation. And when you start to deconstruct from that, you see the world in a totally different way. And you start to see yourself in it differently. and you see how your actions and your beliefs and then the collective of your denomination or whatever, how that has limited you, but also harms the world. So for many of those people, they just deconstruct, they unpack some of those belief systems, but they still desire a spiritual connection. So if I'm consulting with somebody or counseling with somebody who's deconstructing, my goal isn't to say, well, here's the 10 reasons why you should stay unchurched. Here are the 10 reasons that you should leave Christianity. I never do that. What I'm helping them do is see some of those biases and prejudices and indoctrinations that not only harm others, but also harm ourselves, especially when we're talking about Christian patriarchy. So for many people, deconstructing, healing from those things, releasing the things that no longer serve your highest good, then going back into some kind of spirituality, spiritual community where you're not punished for questioning, where you are respected for your gender and not limited by any of those things. So oftentimes they will find a different type of spiritual community. But for some of us, we realize that as big as church was for us, that there was something there until it wasn't. And we stay deconstructing long enough that we say we are outside of that need and that longing. It isn't to say that we don't need community. I'm not saying that. But some of us are holding out for a different kind of community, or perhaps reimagining what those communities might look like. Because this is too big for this conversation, but I do believe that church is in a day of reckoning where entire Christendom is going to have to look at its makeup for the new humanity. What's going to happen after we start unpacking everything that's happening in America right now? So I don't think it's for everyone to stay unchurched or to stay a spiritual wanderer, if you will. But for some of us, I'm content with a spirituality that is in solitude, where I call it the proverbial spiritual wilderness, where when you first when you start to deconstruct and you have that mindset and you're leaving the church of your heritage or the church of your family, and it's your identity. Who are you if you aren't what the church says you are? What do you believe if you no longer believe what the church said you should believe? That places you in a place what I call the spiritual wilderness.
Yeah, it feels like even when you just said it, it feels like I got to grab something, right?
Yes.
Like you feel floaty and like, oh gosh, I need to anchor to anything
Exactly.
at all. When you even just said that, I felt floaty.
And if we can start to accept that the one thing that religion took from us is our autonomy, we were never supposed to give it over.
Yeah.
But we do because it does give us that anchor, but it also takes away our agency. So then it starts to spoon feed us everything that we feel like all of a sudden we're doing spirituality instead of being spiritual. So that place in the spiritual wilderness, if we can see it like as Jesus was wandering alone, it is the perfect symbolism of what that spiritual wilderness is. It's between us and the divine. And every one of us will come out of that the other way, other side, a different person, if we actively do the work of deconstructing. That's why I say just leaving church isn't enough. There is a deconstructing mindset, or you're going to keep all those beliefs tagged to you one way or the other. For instance, when I left church, I was certain that I was going to hell because I was being disobedient. If I had stayed with that, I would have had this mindset of a sinner even decades later because I didn't unpack that. But what has happened for me and many people that follow me is that the spiritual wilderness becomes the practice, that it feels more comfortable to stay in this place and explore connection and humanity and unpack history so that it informs us on where we're going. And do I think it's a certain kind of person? Yeah, probably highly introverted, probably an INFJ, however you want to put the personality type is, or, a person who's like a spiritual leader who can hold that place and say, what is this energy I feel shifting? And how can I help others who might be feeling it as well?
Yeah.
So I do also think that virtual communities can be just as sacred and meaningful as any kind of physical. And because we are so virtual right now, I do believe that you'll start to see um, things changing when it comes to meaning. And what does it actually mean? It's more than just, and this is not to minimize anything that people do in the church kitchen or anything, but those connections go far beyond that. But in our older generations, we were told that was the only way. And
Yeah.
now we're finding it really isn't. There's many ways to show our value, to show our connection, to be meaningful. And so I think that that's what happened, especially after the pandemic. We were able to really reimagine, and now we're on a fast pace to reimagine.
Yeah, I think that everything shifted with COVID, especially like work, family, values, like it all just possibility. Um, I think as humans, we love this concept of, community. We need it. That's why you see kids go into gangs because they don't have that family connection. And then, they join churches and they feel the thing that really always rubbed me funny was when I would go to a Catholic church. That's when I started to really feel, I don't know if it's injustice or anger or downright fury, being Episcopalian, which I call Catholic light. And then you'd go to a Catholic church and you'd have to sit during communion. And I loved communion. And I remember feeling that isolation and judgment of having to sit on the pew while everybody else went up front. And I remember being a little kid, and I don't know what it was, but I used to get so angry when they would pray to the Virgin Mary. I had no idea why, but I would be incensed. I would be angry. Now I look at it like just having a conversation with her. But there was these weird moments of childhood where I was like, this is wrong. You're doing it wrong. This is not the way it's supposed to be. This doesn't feel like love to me. And I think that that's when it started. And then like listening to rules that didn't align, and women aren't allowed to serve in church. And I was like, wait, this is super weird. Like, this is all weird. And so I think that when you start to find the flaws from a very young age, it's like, if it's flawed, it's flawed. If it's flawed, it's flawed. You know what I mean? If you can find all of these little things at age 8, then there must be more to the story. There must be more going on here that I need to look at. And then I did all of these past life regressions, which is basically like self-hypnosis. And everything just started to like flood in of being allowed to see all of these things in past lives where I was not a good person. And I was like, wow, like I am the bad guy. I've been the bad guy. I've been the good guy. And like, it's all about understanding all the guys, all the people and all the perspectives, which makes you then love them because they're a part of you. And then so the end all be all is just the only truth is love, which I think is hysterical because I have love and then I'm like, I just can't, it's just so perfect. So what would you say to people who've been hurt by the church? And like, what's that first step to reclaiming or claiming for the first time your actual spiritual voice when you're hearing when you're hearing people, when you're kind of having my 8-year-old questions? Like, what do you see as being the first step to going, I don't know if it's outside of the church or inside. I don't even know what that is. Like, to listening to self, I guess, for the first time.
So it's interesting that your 8-year-old self was pointing you to your true self, that religion was limiting.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of us, we have in my book, I call them spiritual breadcrumbs, where we can go back through our lives and see how many places we connected and we were questioning, but for the sake of the whole, for the sake of obedience, for the sake of acceptance, for validation, we suffocated. We silenced it because we were being indoctrinated to behave. That was to be obedient, was to be a good Christian.
Because you don't want to go to hell.
That's exactly right. That's
Like,
exactly.
let's put it this way. You do the things because you don't want to go to hell, because that sounds really, really bad. Right?
Yes, 100%. And for me, as a 9-year-old sitting in a Southern Baptist, and I loved the revivals. I went vacation Bible school. I was going to Sunday school, or I was going to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
I love the tent revivals. There's nothing like a Southern Baptist tent revival in July in Kentucky with no AC. But what I did, I would sit there and I'd look at these ministers, and I was fascinated by them. And I'm 9, and I'm thinking, I can do this better. I knew I could do this better, but I can't do this better because I was already aware that women couldn't preach. I could be, so the world tells me I can be whatever I want, Supergirl, but I can't be that. So I'm already dealing with the paradox of in love with a grandmother who very much was instilled in me this spiritual longing and spiritual meaning, and yet already coming in conflict with that paradox. So I think it's an important part of your deconstructing is unpacking that, like going back and looking at what parts of you question that you silenced. I think it's a really good, it's a good practice for even our lives, because oftentimes what we'll find is if we're doing this from a spiritual place, as we're deconstructing from our religion, and healing from religion is deconstructing. Just so this is a big bucket that says
it's so big.
It's so huge.
So big.
And it's very subjective, but this is the way I define it, and this is the way I help people through it. So unpacking that, because then once you start to see is that, oh, I see how that had parallels in my life as I was in an abusive relationship and I kept quiet for too long. Because if you're seeking validation in religion, you're more than likely seeking validation and using the same methodology in your life.
Yep.
So whether it's you have an abusive professor who's condescending and doesn't see your work as valuable, or you have an abusive boyfriend, you have an abusive father, you see those connections and it gets big.
And it normalizes it.
Exactly.
It's normalized. I mean, that's the thing. As you're just sitting here talking, I'm like, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, right?
Yeah.
And if they teach us, because I look at religion, not spirituality, not that, not love. I look at religion as the right hand of the government. And I'm sure that you see, I mean, it's part and parcel. So they use the government uses religion to keep everyone in line and scare the living hell out of them. And it keeps, and there's part of it that might be true. It might be true that might be a decent thing to do. I don't know. Like, because we've never seen it not be here. We've never not seen, the Greek gods or the Mayan gods, or we've never seen, in my view, what it looks like to have the totality of the population not oppressed or controlled by religion in some way, shape, or form, wherein the government benefits from that control, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so as you're sitting there talking about, you take that with you into all your relationships, it's so freaking true, because the oppressive thumb on your head doesn't go away just because it's a different thumb.
Perfect. Yes, that's it.
And you play that role, right? You play the role. You know how to play the role. You know what it feels like to be oppressed and controlled and manipulated. And you gaslight the shit out of yourself and say, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just a bad person. Maybe I'm a bad girl. Maybe I don't know how to control myself. Maybe I am doomed for hell. And you take those thoughts, that sinew, that backbone that you've learned, and then you go, well, maybe I am a bad daughter. Maybe I am a bad girlfriend. Maybe I am a bad employee. and I'm not learning the things, and I need to squash that inner fire, and I'm not doing the right thing. And it's like you're sitting here talking to me right now, and I'm like, holy shit, that stint in Fundamental Baptist with that exact guy who brought me into it, holy shit.
Yeah. Wow, when that happens, it's really, it's like you were talking about the spiritual wilderness. It's one of those things that just completely releases you from the anchors of what the narratives that have been placed on you.
Yeah.
And so that's such an important to start back there. If there's stories back there, and as you start to journal, I know it even happened with me when I was writing my book. It even happens now. Like all of a sudden, I'll unlock a memory that I've completely thought about. I haven't thought about for years. And like, oh, I see how that's related. And now I see how I'm ready, how it's rising now because I'm ready to face it. So really using this time to start thinking about, when I had a choice, when did I stop believing in myself? When did I allow someone else to have power over me? When did I look at myself and say, I'm not good enough? And someone in your life, or someone said that over you and you believed it. And so your worth was in the fact that you were in proximity to that organization, your church, your husband, your institution, whatever it was. Think of that larger question and breaking that down. And if you need a lane, then use it with your spirituality. And I love the way you differentiated between religion and spirituality, because that's one of the things that feels like nails on a chalkboard to me when people say they use religion when they mean spirituality.
Yeah.
And I think part of that certainly benefits organized religion, because there's this assumption that to be spiritual, you must be religious. And so I think it's
so the opposite.
Oh, for sure.
Like,
And
to
so
me, I look at spirituality and I'm like, how can you be spiritual and believe any of this? That God's this horrible, mean, like, how can you quote, I knew every hair on your head? Okay, so you knew every hair on my head. You knew everything that I would ever do. And you still had me be born so that I would go to hell. What? How mean is that?
it's
Just the logic isn't logicking. I just say to my, I will say so often on social media, like, I don't care how, if I knew that my kids were going to be XYZ, and then be like, okay, now you're going to spend eternity in the brimstone and fire. Like, no parent would do that unless they were psychotic. And we just apply all these human characteristics to God. And so how do you separate God from the institution and Jesus from Christianity? Because we're talking about that so much right now in the news, in the media, in government. Who knew we would be in a place where they're like making people have Bibles in public schools? Like, all this is so, I never thought I'd live to see any of this. Maybe I didn't want to, I don't know. But I just didn't think any of this was possible. So when someone comes to you and they're like, you are anti-Christian, you're anti-God, you're speaking out against this, you're not and I look at it and I say, pious, God, religion, love. How do you separate those things when people come to you and go, I believe in God, I believe Jesus walked the earth, I believe in the teachings of Christ, but.
So I'll start with a story. First, I love how you have unpacked it and explain it. You can tell you've done the work, and I really do appreciate that.
Thanks.
For me, I started when I knew that I left church, and I still knew I had some kind of desire or calling, if you will, because I believe a calling comes from someplace, a higher source, but it's not just a Christian God ordained. So I still use that phrase. I'm reclaiming some of those phrases that were very Christian centric at one time. I went to university. I started at a Bible college. Now I'm in my late 40s, early 50s when I started this journey. And what I realized when I was there is like, wait a minute, I'm regurgitating exactly what I know. They're taking a literal interpretation of the Bible and telling me what to believe. And so I didn't stay there very long. I was only there about a year. And then I went on to Arizona State University to study world religions. And the first class in my world religions class literally had me on my knees. I knew I was searching for something that I already knew. And what I needed to do was release God from rules.
Yeah.
Release God from the rigid dogma. Even to say that now makes me emotional, because that moment alone here, as I'm still listening to Hillsong, as I'm studying Hillsong, for those of you who don't know, Christian contemporary, everything is pretty much based on Hillsong these days, or Jesus culture, whatever that's called.
Yeah.
And so I read about the experiences of the world around, how they tried to define creation. When are we here? When the awakening happened kind of worldwide, and people start to realize we're here for a reason. So how did we get here? From a dung beetle to the creation story. There's many. And so seeing it from that perspective, but also understanding then that everyone had a story for what that meant and how they experienced the divine.
Yeah.
And so that was the first part of releasing God for me. And so for the longest time, because I was holding so much church hurt, I couldn't even use the word God, because in my experience, God meant this anthropomorphized, angry, gray-haired God who really cared about my parking space because I was a good Christian, but didn't care that my neighbor's child was dying from cancer because they weren't. And so I did not want anything to do with that God. And so I left that name alone. And I had so many things. I usually would just say this being that has so many names, but nothing can define who or what this is. We lack human understanding, and we lack the words.
Yeah.
And I do believe that's what's happened. And a lot of times we get concrete, black and white. There's no gray in how we define God. And that's when that rigidity happens, that's when you start to see extremism and radicalism, because we're stuck in those old dogmatic rules, which is definitely happening here in America. Jesus was a little bit more complicated for me. There is a book by Adya Shante called Rescuing Jesus. I'm pretty sure it's it. That really helped a lot, because I then saw the Jesus through the mystical lens. So I've seen him through the mythical, I've seen him through the mystical, I've seen him through the zealot, I've seen him through the place where you look at the Bible from a scholarly perspective and understand that a lot of what was attributed to him probably wasn't said by him. But yet there was something about Jesus that people wanted to capture at that time. And I believe it was more than just taking advantage of a really good story. So I talk all the time about, what am I going to do about Jesus? That's part of my practice. So as I stay in the wilderness, one of my practices is, what am I doing about Jesus? It's an ongoing story. It's an ongoing saga. I refuse to let that go, because there's so much there that can teach us about compassion and awakening and pushing back on establishment.
Yeah.
And what it looks like to walk into the middle of a government systemic order that's been approved, this corrupt place where people are getting their money fairly exchanged, and flip the tables.
Yeah.
A physical act of resistance.
Yeah. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, put him on the radar of the Roman soldiers that said, he's going to be a problem.
He is a problem. The way I see Jesus is that we've all forgotten when, like, we go through that birth canal, it's like all wiped, because we can't have the answers to the test questions, or what's the point of being here?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, he didn't forget. He was given the gift of not forgetting who he was and where he came from and what the possibilities are of the spirit within. and that this is a matrix of sorts. And because of that, he was, allowed to learn in childhood. I actually got to go to the places where he learned from the Buddha in India. It was fascinating. I highly recommend it. So he learned kind of how to be human and how to do the human thing, while also at the same time not forgetting and being allowed to not forget. And so he was the perfection of the 3-dimensional and the 5-dimensional. And sometimes they butt heads. And sometimes he was able to lean more into the 5D. Sometimes when he cried for his friend who lost their friend to death, he was in the 3-dimensional. He couldn't help himself because that's what the experience is. It's emotional. It's human. And if he didn't die on the cross because he didn't need to, he could have been like zap, 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 zoop, 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 right? Lasers out of his eyes, whatever he wanted to do. He knew that he had to fulfill the prophecy, or none of it would have mattered, because then he wouldn't have been who he said he was. The one thing I got from that really shitty boyfriend was Jesus either was a liar, he was crazy, or he was the Christ. That's it. And I always remember that because it's so on point that he either lied and said who he was crazy and said he was that and wasn't, or he was that. And so for me, I look at Jesus as being what is possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I see that was what is possible, and to remind me what is possible. That's it. That's all it's supposed to be.
That's beautiful. And I haven't studied him from those perspectives. I've heard of them. But because I spend so much time in the deconstructing part where people are just like, wait, what are you telling me about God? What are you telling me about Jesus? And we're going to unpack that so you don't end up on your floor like I did in one fell swoop. Let's try to take it baby steps at a time. For me, I am content with the mystery.
Mm.
For instance, there's a lot of energy that happens this time of year with the thinning of the veil. That's why we end up with all these rituals around the world, whether it's Halloween, All Souls Day, All Saints Day, the Day of the Dead. There's so many traditions that are happening this time of year. When people ask me, am I going to deconstruct to atheism? I will tell them I've seen too much that of things I don't know and things I don't understand, but something that connects us in a way that we still can't define. That is my belief for humanity, that we're awakening enough to be able to come to a place to understand more than what we've been told in the past.
Oh yeah.
And if our religion isn't encouraging that kind of expansiveness, that kind of questioning, that kind of wondering, the curiosity is where humanity grows, where compassion grows, where empathy grows. There's a reason that Charlie Kirk said that empathy was a sin, or while Elon Musk says that that's one of the humanity's biggest mistakes is empathy. So
weird. It's so weird.
Imagine that. A bunch of white men have problems with empathy, but when people are awakening to it and we understand that we have more in common than we don't, magic happens.
Yeah.
And that comes from more just a place that physical. And that isn't to say that atheism is shortchanged, or atheism isn't true, or that being atheist is bad. I'm always amazed at how many atheists I have who follow me. And where I actually learn from them, because from a scholarly perspective, if you can unpack the restrictions that religion put on you for how you must look at and interpret ancient scripture, it's actually fascinating to see it from a perspective of people who have really studied it.
Yeah.
and then it leaves you with nothing but your real self to say, then who am I and what do I believe? And guess what? You get to do that. We can all
Yeah.
sit at this table of humanity and not and sometimes be in disagreement about what we believe and what happens after we leave this earthly plane, and still respect and love each other and work for the good of the whole. Oftentimes, organized religion puts us in a bucket and says the only way we can do that is if one group is in power, and that's where you get Christian nationalism.
Yeah, and to me, like I love the idea of like blasphemy, like using the Lord's name in vain, in the sense of I'm going to use God or Jesus to manipulate. That to me is blasphemy, is when you're using it for negative, for your own personal gain.
Yeah.
And so like I made this video because I was like, oh, you're so screwed. Because you're like, oh, it was I think it was Christy Nome. Yeah. And I was like, she's like, we're doing the Lord's work. And I'm like, oh, good luck. good luck on that. Because
Yeah.
I kind of see the way I envision all of it is that we are all one. And when you do things, you then have to learn from that. So like when you judge, like if I like literally say my kid would never do that, I am to the point in my life of my spiritual journey that thing will happen to me within 30 minutes. I will get a call from the school in 30 minutes or something.
Every time.
It's instantaneous, my manifestation, and like karma comes back instantly. And so I am like, okay, I'm learning. I got it. I get it. I'm supposed to learn that. Shut your mouth. And so that's where the compassion comes in. So when you see something, you go, okay, something in me is not healed, and it's wanting me to judge whatever that is living inside of myself that wants to be better than that, And so where's that flaw in me? So judgment allows me to look for the flaws in self.
That's beautiful.
I kind of
Yeah.
go, you're doing it. So when I look at what's going on right now, I know that 100% of this, national, white Christian national Christianity crap that's happening, it is the largest form of blasphemy, of using God to hurt in the name of God that I have probably ever witnessed. And that to me is not good. Like I look at that and I'm like, oh, it's so bad. It's so bad. And because of people growing up in the church, because I look at piousness, right? That better than, like that pious to me is I'm better than you. I'm going up to the pulpit. You have to sit behind. I'm a good Christian. You are not. I'm a this, and I'm better than all of these people. And we do see that in spirituality. And I know a lot of people on social media call out spiritualists. Like you're just doing the church thing all over again, people, which I love. Right. But I look at that pious energy as being extremely problematic. Extremely problematic. And I feel sad for the people that are falling prey to it, because it does work. We've seen people talk about these mega churches, and it does work. The music works, the theatrics works, the calling to the front of the pulpit works. All of this stuff works. It pulls that energy inside of you that wants to be close to God and do the right thing. And for the life of me, and I know you're there too, I don't understand how they justify all of this horrible behavior in the name of God. And that's what keeps me making political videos, and I can't get away from it. And I know the people that follow me don't love it, but it makes me absolutely insane.
So last year, my book launched.
Yeah, we have to talk about that too, because
Well,
I didn't even realize you had a book
I
for
do
some
have a book,
reason.
but
And
this isn't self-promotion. I'm horrible at self-promotion, first of all. But I pretty much went dormant at that time because of a personal situation, a personal challenge. But the one thing it did allow me to do during that time is prioritize what it is that what do I want my voice to be?
yeah,
Because back in 21, I really got vocal about Christian nationalism to the point where some of the Christian deconstruction community told me to stop talking about it, that I was making people uncomfortable. And then everybody's talking about it. I'm not saying I'm the only one, but they're at that for my little niche, people weren't talking about it. But it did change my content. I wish I could wear my Christian Karen wig all the time and make fun and do the skits, because I've done that. I'm pretty good at it. Even
you are
as a
good
boomer,
at
I'm
it.
pretty good at it. But the energy has shifted for me, and I really had to think about that. Like, what is it? Because people will say, "Oh, where's the wig? Where's the wig? Where's the wig?" And I have to make a commitment to, no, this is who I am.
Yeah,
This is the voice. It's almost prophetic. I think many of us are feeling it. I think especially women right now, because whether you want to call it feminism or whether you want to call it matriarchy, and for those of you who think matriarchy is just another version of patriarchy, you got to do some serious education,
yeah,
because matriarchy has nothing to do with patriarchy. But I do believe that there is a time, as I said to you earlier, such as this, that there is a rising voice that for many of us who have this gift, which is my deconstructing, but the intersection of politics, where we are risking a platform that where we have our zone of genius,
yeah.
but we see the intersection and we cannot be silent. And I think it's more important for those of us who feel that and know that and have the words rising up in us to do exactly that, to speak on it, because for so many years we were silenced. For so many years we weren't allowed to be the ones. For so many years we weren't allowed to admit that we had that language. We could teach, we could correct, we could inspire, we could inform, we could disrupt, we could agitate. We had the gift and the craft, especially as women age. I very much believe in the archetypes of the maiden, mother, crone, and none of them are as bad as the old hag in the archetypes of the old fables and things like that. We're very much a part of insulting the intelligence of the aging woman.
Yeah.
So, and it's not about motherhood. It's yes, the power of creating, the power of nurturing, but that it's not necessarily related to children. So anybody related that has not had children, it's about the power of woman.
Creation.
And
Yeah.
it's not.
Do you
Good.
believe in, like, because I see the shift as so in alignment with the age of Aquarius, the age of the divine feminine, the age of truth. Like, we have stepped into where all of the everything is just coming to the surface. All the lies are revealed. All the truth is coming out. And it's so, to me, it's so obvious that this is what is happening. I believe that the coming into the age of Aquarius is the rise of the divine feminine. And it is exactly what is happening right now, period.
Mhm.
Period.
I don't do a lot with astrology, but because isn't that what the age of Aquarius
I think
is?
it has something to do, like, it is that, but and I'm not an astrologer either, outside of I'm a Libra, and that's kind of the end of it for me.
I'm a Libra.
Are you really?
I'm a Libra, and we just had one of the most powerful seasons. I know it certainly was for me, and I do study the tarot in as much as I use it as a practice for myself. I
Yeah.
will never feel comfortable enough to use it for anyone else. I believe some of our practices need to be private, and some of our beliefs and things like that, what we use to sustain us. Hey, if it was the first of the month and you blew cinnamon through your door and you started, and a lot of times the rise of the matriarchy, the divine feminine, harkens us back to traditions of our ancestors. So you will start to see, and I believe that it's very much not a coincidence that people are starting to look at some of the rituals of pagan rituals, and that can be from creating ritual around a candle or mantras and things like that or chants that create community, that create awareness, that calm the nervous system to allow clarity to move forward. So what this time and space is something that I haven't spent a lot of time, but I agree with you. I think that makes sense, that there is a dawning of something that is happening. And humanity every time can meet the challenge or destined to repeat it. And the problem that we have had in the past, whether if we just go back to the Civil War in our country, let's just keep it at American Christianity. The problem that we've had is that because Christian patriarchy has had such a stronghold on our community, on our nation, white Christian men then tolerated too much of the bigotry that still existed after the Civil War, which allowed there to be a romanticizing of the Southern legacy.
Yeah.
So that by the time you get to the 50s, 60s, and 70s, you're romanticizing the Confederate flag. You're romanticizing something that only lasted 5 years. You're romanticizing things that should not, the Confederate statues that started coming up. Most of them didn't even get erected until the Civil Rights era started. So you start to see this tolerance that has been in here due to Christian patriarchy, because white men are going to feel compassion towards white men, not necessarily looking at the toxicity of the ideologies behind it. Matriarchy, on the other hand, will look at it and say, what is the good of the whole? What do we need to do? What do we want to imagine? What do we want to birth? What is going to protect those among us who are the most vulnerable? And we can agree that that's going to be the children, the voiceless, the disabled. Those are the ones that we would take a priority to protect, because we understand that when a community works together, we are all stronger. We are all thriving. So I think that, again, if we look at those cycles, what happens unless we want to enter back into a war era, which is where we've come from, World War I, World War II, he's waking up, I'm sorry, or even back past other wars, again, this cycle. And when we face our humanity and say, I'm so sorry,
it doesn't matter.
Face our humanity and say, we don't want this, but we let it rise too far, so then it becomes war, versus now, can we quell this? Can we get a control over this before it rises up to a fascist authoritarian place that is going to have to utilize violence to get it down? I hope not. I don't want to see that for anybody, especially my children and my grandchildren. So what are we going to have to do to help subside that? That is where the voice of the feminine needs to be in the room. When you just have a bunch of white men sitting around, it's always going to look violent. They're going to think violence is an option. We already have a president who said he was going to stop all wars, talking about dropping bombs in Venezuela and now Nigeria, because Christians are being persecuted. What are we talking about? When the data clearly shows that the most persecuted person in Nigeria is the Muslim. He's making things up because Christian patriarchy chooses violence. But women in the room they're going to look at this different.
I think women, though, need to this is the dichotomy. I can place myself in those large auditoriums. I can energetically place myself, skirt wearing, hands together, listening to people on the stage, and I can feel myself be better than. I can feel myself be a good person. I'm so good. I am here. There is my man. I am subservient. I know what I can get myself there. But I also voted for everyone. I voted for the benefit of everyone. I think, I spend, I boycott, I speak about the things that I know benefit the whole. I know that as a white woman, financially, in the immediate, I may benefit from the patriarchy, but I vote from a space of loving the whole. I can jump back and forth. And I think that you probably can too, because it's been in your lifetime that you've felt certain things and and you can wrap your brain around it. And I think that type of person that can see both and feel both and know both beyond a shadow of a doubt, when you can speak clearly, knowing the mentality of the person that feels like a good person, that's when you can really speak powerfully. I believe that because you know the energy and what it takes to touch that person and go, you're a good person, but not because you're standing there in that room. You're a good person because you woke up good. You woke up worthy.
There you go. A white woman who understands, uses her privilege for the good of the whole.
Yep.
That's a powerful statement, and a powerful woman. That's a woman walking into matriarchy.
Yep.
That's what we do. And we also understand that we're not only amplifying the voices of the oppressed, the historically oppressed, the Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We're getting out of the way because they have not been allowed a seat at the table that Christian patriarchy they have suffered greatly under that system. More so than any other.
I think that too, the first thing that I did to really get to where I'm at right now, and it was probably 5 years ago now, was embrace my racism in the sense of going, wait, that was a racist thought, feeling, better than, whatever, right? And I live my life today saying I'm racist so that I can not be above racism. I don't know if I'm being clear, meaning that it's still somewhere in there. So never pretend that you're not. Right?
Preach
Never
it.
pretend that you've grown out of that.
Preach it.
You see? And because when you say I'm racist, you're always calling yourself out. You're always checking your bias. You're always checking the sinew of your programming. But if you go, I'm not racist, then you're immune to all of it. You don't have to learn anymore.
You're
right.
100%. The biggest loss of followers will be when I talk about the racism of a white woman, and including myself in that. I'll use we language when I'm writing or I'm doing a video, and that will ultimately enrage women who are just absolutely imploding with what they think is an insult because they want to believe that they've worked beyond that. But what you said, as far as it being in a continual process, is just a paradigm shift. If we recognize that this indoctrination started the minute we were born, then until our last breath, we're going to have to be actively involved in the decolonizing our mind, because it's always right there below the surface. It's waiting to show the privilege, the entitlement, the stereotypical language, the microaggressions. They're all right there. And that mindset just opens us up to be accountable, to learn, to walk into a room to understand you shouldn't be the loudest voice, and don't assume you're the smartest, which is part of what our indoctrination taught us. So I think it's absolutely a breath of fresh air to sit with someone and hear you basically mirror back to me what a lot of my conversations are about and what a lot of my teachings are about. But ultimately, it'll be the white woman who will not be happy with something I say when it comes to, if I'm calling out church corruption, if I'm calling out whatever, it would always be someone that
because it
will have to
hurts.
say, not all churches, not all
It
white
hurts.
women, it does.
Right.
It does.
It's painful. I remember sobbing. I had these 3 Black women who took the time and broke me down. And I am so grateful to them because I had no clue that I was racist. None. And after that, I did this whole series. It was a podcast series on my other podcast with all of these women of color who were so gracious to sit with me and share their stories of everything from sending their kids to a white school versus a Black school, touching hair, touching teeth, and you name it. They broke it down. They were amazing. But it was during that time that I said to myself, this is going to hurt. This is going to hurt because I always saw myself as a good person, and I was a liar. And now I call myself out even on my own thoughts. And my husband and I will comment to each other to call ourselves out. You see a group of white kids riding bikes. You see a group of Black kids riding bikes. There's thought processes behind those two visions that will swirl through your brain, swirl through your body, and we will verbalize to call each other out and go, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? And so now we see a group of white kids riding their bikes and we'll go, gang activity. Because you know what I mean? Like we're blatant about it in the teaching of it. And it's to the point now where my freshman and junior are like, Mom, not everything is racist. I said, yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. And they're used to it. And now they see it out in school. I just had a really great conversation with my 16-year-old, and she talks about how the N-word is used at her friends' homes and how she's so grateful that she was raised in the household that she's raised in and that she doesn't have that hate in her heart and that she's able to see it and she appreciates it. Because I always look at, these families that raise their kids with this kind of language and this kind of hate and this type of patriarchy and white supremacy. You are not doing your kids, your white children, a favor. Mm-mm. You are putting them at a grave disadvantage in the future and now. And we talk about these things in my household because that's my job. That's my job as a spiritual teacher. That's my job as a white woman. That's my job as a mother, is to send loving children out into the world who recognize their own internal racism, their own internal biases. And they watch an adult call themselves out. They watch an adult talk about it, that it's normal. It's not something to be quiet about. And I think that the more people that do this type of work, the more people that listen to people like yourself and get uncomfortable, get angry. Because what they're really angry at is they're angry that they feel that way. They're angry that they know that they are this way and you're breaking down their ego, and it's uncomfortable to have your ego broken because you've aligned yourself with good. And then you're coming up on their screen telling them, nope, you're not.
The first 100%. And that you have to reconcile. You said a lot of important things there, but you brought up the fact that this is spiritual. This is spiritual. Decolonizing your mind is spiritual, because what we haven't been able to recognize for many of us is that our first teacher in racism was Sunday school. And how you soften the language that's in a literal translation of the Bible to rationalize, justify a slavery that existed back then but didn't exist now. So you have to accept some things about the God that did endorse slavery. And you have to see that was part of your indoctrination. So I think that's a real important conversation.
So, I mean, we could talk about this for 722,000 days. I love it so much, because I think anything that you align yourself with regard to the ego, anything that you align yourself with that gets poked is such a blessing. When you're challenged, it's a blessing.
Yeah.
You know, I try to wake up every day and be like, you know, I'm kind of nothing, but I'm everything, but I'm nothing, but I'm everything, but I'm nothing, right?
Yeah.
And when you go from that gray place, the world is your oyster of learning, because you're not like, this is the way it is. Because that hurts to break down when you're in that armor.
Yeah.
You know, and so if you're just kind of like, ooh, I love floating, right, in the cloud, as you said earlier, and you're not anchored to anything, that's where the magic is.
Yeah.
Float, be in the gray space, be in the fluff. Just, and okay, yep, I'm racist. Oh, yep, I'm in the patriarchy. Yep. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to check that. I'm going to challenge that, right? And when you're in that space of the flow, then you can grow.
Yeah.
Then you can become, you know, get rid of the anchors, get rid of the dogma, get rid of the belief system. And that's where the magic happens. Like you said, inside of maybe that atheistic mentality of like nothing, and then go from there.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid. Don't limit what your deconstructing, decolonizing journey is going to lead you. Don't be afraid of it. Let it lead you. You'll know when you're moving towards your true self.
Yeah, it's good.
I don't think you ever arrive. I don't want to use that mentality, because I think for me, I'm always going to be on this journey.
Oh, because something new is going to come up and put you.
Yeah.
And you're like, damn it, something new.
I held on to my Christian faith as long as I could, decades.
Yeah.
Until it was time for me to redefine myself this past year.
Well,
so, yeah.
I need to have you on my other podcast so we can just talk about your book.
Okay.
I need to get your book, because I do a ton of authors. I'm actually doing an author right after this over on that podcast today. But we got to get you over so we can get your book out there. What's the title of it? Do you happen to have it near you?
I do.
Yay.
It's called Deconstructing, Leaving Church, Finding Faith. You can get a signed copy at revkarla.com. You can also get it where all books are sold.
Awesome. I'm going to get myself a copy, and then we're going to have you over on that other podcast where I have all my authors, so we can talk about the book and I can read all of it, and
I'd love that.
Challenge all my other parts that still haven't been challenged, which I love. So thank you so very much for being here with us today on TikTok Famous Podcast. Almost 1 million followers. I mean, that's a mega church in itself. That's what's so wild. You don't need a brick and mortar to talk to people and connect with people. There is TikTok, there is social media, there is YouTube, there are books, there's all these beautiful things that we can connect and teach and grow. People around the world in all of these different thoughts. So thank you so much for doing the work. Thank you for putting yourself out there. It is a challenge at times. But I so appreciate you, and I'm blessed to have you here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor.
All right, guys, I will see you all here next week. Thanks for listening. TikTok Famous Podcast. See you next time.
Thanks for for tuning in to the TikTok Famous Podcast with Meredyth Willits. If you're loving the unfiltered stories and behind-the-scenes truths, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show. Until next time, let's get famous.